Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to English Listening Pod. In this video, I will talk about Ernesto Che Guevara, a revolutionary leader and guerrilla commander. This is the story of his life told simply, so learners of English can follow and feel the excitement, the fear, and the quiet moments he had. From his childhood in Argentina, to long journeys, to fighting in the mountains of Cuba, to his last days in Bolivia, his life was full of strong choices and hard consequences. Ernesto was born on June 14th, 1928, in Rosario, Argentina, into a family that loved books and learning. As a child, he had health problems, but he loved to read and to learn. He was curious about the world and interested in science and medicine. He studied hard and became a doctor because he wanted to help people. In his university years, he read about politics and history, and he started to ask big questions about why some people live in wealth and others live in deep poverty. These early thoughts followed him everywhere he went. When he graduated, Ernesto did not stay long in a quiet clinic. He wanted to see the world. He traveled across South America on a small motorcycle with a friend. They called the bike La Poderosa, the mighty one. The journey took months. He saw beautiful landscapes and also a very hard life. He saw miners with no safety, peasant families with little food, and children without doctors. Seeing these things changed him deeply. He wrote about the trip later in a small book that many young people read. The book shows how travel can open your eyes and change your mind about what is fair and what must change. After these journeys, Ernesto worked as a doctor for a short time, but he kept traveling and meeting people who wanted big changes. In Mexico in 1955, he met a group planning to return to Cuba and fight against a government they saw as corrupt and unfair. The group was led by Fidel Castro. Ernesto decided to join them. He took the nickname Che, a friendly word from his Argentine speech, and the name stuck. He sailed with the small rebel group to Cuba and entered the mountains to fight. He was not only a doctor there, he became a soldier and a teacher, showing how to survive in the hills and how to win the trust of local people. Life in the mountains of the Sierra Maestra was hard. The rebels slept in the open, ate little, and walked for many hours. They learned to use the land to hide from a better armed army. Che learned quickly that winning a revolution needed more than arms. It needed the support of ordinary people. He and the other rebels helped peasants with small medicines, listened to their complaints, and promised a better life after the fight. The rebels grew in number because people saw they had courage and a plan. In 1959, the government of Fulgencio Batista fell, and the rebels walked into Havana. For Ernesto, that victory felt like proof that ordinary people together could change a country. After the victory in Cuba, Che worked in the new government. He held important jobs. He helped plan land reform to give land to poor farmers. He worked on plans for industry and banking. He traveled as a Cuban official and spoke in many places about his ideas. He believed strongly that countries in Latin America should be free from outside control and that workers and peasants should share power. Che wanted a fast change. He wanted to move quickly to remove old power structures and build new institutions that helped ordinary people. While working in government, Che also wrote and explained his ideas. He read Marx and other thinkers and tried to turn thought into action. He believed in the need for people to act with moral strength, to be brave, and to help others before they help themselves. He spoke about the idea of a new man, a person who would work not for personal profit, but for the good of the community. He thought education and moral example were very important. He wanted people to change not only their laws, but also their daily lives and values. Even as a government official, Che was restless. He felt that the revolution in Cuba should inspire and support other revolutions. He thought the movement could move across borders. He believed that poor people in Africa and Latin America also needed help to free themselves. This belief led him to leave his comfortable post in Cuba and try to organize revolutions in other places. He did not want to be only a government leader. He wanted to be in the field, living with fighters and sharing danger with them. The first place he went after leaving official work was the Congo in Africa. There, he tried to help local fighters who opposed their government. The mission in the Congo was difficult, and it failed. Language and culture were different, and the local groups had their own problems. The fighters faced disease, bad supplies, and poor coordination. Che learned how hard it is to help a revolution in a foreign country where the people and conditions are different. This trip taught him lessons about the need for strong local support and careful planning. After the Congo, Che returned to Cuba for a short time. He rested and planned his next mission. He decided to go to Bolivia in South America. Bolivia had a history of inequality and revolt, and Che believed that a new revolution there could potentially spread to other nearby countries. In 1966, he entered Bolivia with a small group of guerrilla fighters. They moved into the mountains and forests, trying to reach peasants and to build a base of support. From the start, they faced many problems. They were strangers in the local area. They did not speak all the local languages well, and they had trouble finding steady supplies of food and medicine. Life in Bolivia was harsh. The guerrilla group moved at night, slept in cold fields, and often ate very little. Che and his men tested their endurance every day. They taught and trained the local fighters, but the local peasants often feared government reprisals and did not join openly. The Bolivian army, sometimes with training and advice from foreign partners, searched the countryside carefully. The guerrillas found it hard to hide in a place where landowners and local officials could be hostile. Supplies and information were not reliable, and the small group slowly grew weaker under constant pressure. In the months of 1967, the pressure increased. The Bolivian military tracked the guerrillas through informants and careful patrols. One night, the guerrillas were surrounded near a place called La Higuera. The men fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and tired. In the short battle, Ernesto was wounded. The soldiers captured him and took him prisoner. The capture shocked many of his supporters and also worried those who had feared a wider war. For months, the world had watched his actions, and now the news of his capture spread quickly. After Che was taken, the next day, the Bolivian soldiers executed him on October 9th, 1967. The execution was quick, and his body was shown to the local people. The soldiers wanted to be sure that the famous guerrilla leader could not return to the fight. Some reports say that his capture and execution were intended to end the small movement quickly and to make a public example. The death happened in a small schoolhouse in La Higuera, and many details of those final hours were later told by witnesses and soldiers. Che faced his death with calm. He spoke calmly and showed little fear. Even in those last moments, he expressed his beliefs and his loyalty to the cause he had chosen. After his death, the soldiers took his body to a nearby town and displayed it in a public place so people could see that the leader had fallen. They also removed his hands for identification, and the body parts were kept for some time to make sure he was really Che. Years later, this fact became part of many stories about the painful and tragic nature of his end. The public display showed how his death affected people differently. For opponents, it signaled the end of a dangerous campaign. For supporters, it made a martyr out of a man many still admired. News of his death reached many countries quickly. People around the world reacted with shock and strong feelings. In many cities, students and activists mourned. They held vigils and protests. For many leftist groups, Che's death was a call to continue the struggle. For other people, it was a sign that violent revolutions could cause much suffering. Governments that feared revolution felt relieved. The reactions showed how divided the world had become in those years. Che's death did not make his ideas die. It made his image stronger for many who looked to him for inspiration. In the years after his death, his body was buried secretly in a place near Valle Grande, Bolivia. For decades, the exact location of his grave was not known to many people. Families of the fighters and local people remembered the events, and later researchers and investigators searched for his remains. In 1997, after long work by historians and investigators, his remains were found and identified. The bones were brought back to Cuba with great ceremony. This return of his remains changed the story for many Cubans and for international supporters, who felt that their hero should rest in his country's soil. When his remains were returned to Cuba, they were buried in a mausoleum in the city of Santa Clara. Santa Clara was an important place in the Cuban Revolution because Che had led an important battle there in 1958 that helped decide the victory. The mausoleum became a place of memory and pilgrimage. People visited to remember his life and to think about the reasons he fought. The site also became a place where new generations asked questions about the past and about the meaning of struggle and sacrifice. Beyond the place of his burial, Che's image moved into books, films, music, and art. The famous photograph of his face on a cap became a symbol for many different causes. Some people wore his image because they admired his courage and his devotion to the poor. Others used his image as a fashion sign without knowing much about his politics. This change from a personal portrait into a global symbol showed how powerful images can be. Yet the real life behind the image was far more complex than the simple symbol many people saw. After his death, young men and women in many countries tried to copy his methods. Some small guerrilla groups rose in different places. Some had brief successes, others failed quickly. Many historians say that without deep local support and careful planning, foreign-led guerrilla campaigns often fail. Che's efforts in Bolivia and the Congo showed the limits of trying to export a revolution exactly as it happened in one place. Leaders had to adapt to local culture, language, geography, and politics. The lessons of his life became case studies in both success and failure for students of politics and war. In Cuba, Che kept a strong place in the national story. Schools, books, and official messages remembered his work and his sacrifices. For the Cuban government, he was a model of devotion and courage. For many Cubans, he remained a complicated figure, a friend of the poor who also supported strict measures in defense of the revolution. Over time, people in Cuba and abroad debated what parts of his life were most important and what lessons the new generations should learn. The debate continued because his life mixed moral courage with actions that caused real suffering for others. Around the world, writers and filmmakers told his story in many ways. The Motorcycle Diaries film introduced his young self to new audiences and showed how the early travels shaped his ideas. Other books and films focused on the guerrilla life, the drama of the mountains, and the final days in Bolivia. These stories often ask deep questions. What is the right price for justice? Can violence make a just society? Who decides the way forward? Che's life became a way to ask these big questions in schools and in public discussions. People who study his life closely try to be fair. They read his letters, his speeches, and the reports of people who fought with him and against him. They look for facts and try to separate myths from truth. They ask how much his own choices made the difference and how much the international context, the Cold War, foreign economic power, shaped events. These careful studies show that history is rarely simple. Che's life shows both idealism and the limits of action when conditions are hard. If you read his own words, you find a man who thought deeply about sacrifice, duty, and action. He believed that a committed person could change society if they were ready to suffer and to teach others by example. He also believed that revolution must come from below, from ordinary people. These ideas inspired many and worried many others. His letters from Bolivia show a man tired and sick, but still convinced he followed a path he could not leave. His last messages reflected his belief that the struggle would continue, even if he died. In the end, Ernesto Che Guevara's life shows a man who changed from a young doctor and traveler into a soldier and symbol. He lived with intensity and choice. He accepted danger and distance from family to follow his beliefs. He taught, he fought, and he tried to build a new world. His death in Bolivia closed one chapter, but his life continued to influence conversations about justice and change. People still read his letters, visit the places he walked, and discuss the reasons he acted as he did. The story is not only about the end, but about the long journey. The travels, the mountains, the busy government offices, and the lonely nights by a campfire. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. Tell me in the comments, which part of Che Guevara's life surprised you most? His long travels as a young doctor, his work in Cuba, or his last days in Bolivia? Share your thoughts in the comments section. See you in our upcoming videos.